So how do we solo board games? One player or one team. Solo board games that don't have a solo type mechanic. And for the illustration of this vlog, we're going to look at two of my favorite games, two of my favorite titles as an example. The first being Conan, and the second being Xia, Legends of a Drift system. So one fantasy, one futuristic sci-fi. Certainly, more and more gaming systems incorporate this idea that the game itself, through the automation or the game AI, the game is going to play itself versus the team, versus the players, whether that's one player, a group, four players. Games like that are ideal to play solo, either controlling one character or faction or playing a bunch, because the game engine is going to throw stuff at you. Then there are games like Conan where one player is the overlord, the necromancer. They're in charge of the minions and the monsters and are trying to beat the team. You know, we see this with like Descent, second edition. And then there's games like Xia where the players are competing, not necessarily fighting each other, but they're competing against a timer, the first person to reach a certain number of victory points. Or after 6 turns, whoever has the most victory points or game points wins. So how do we explore solo from that perspective? Now, of course, you could house rule the games, and afterwards, often a lot of these games will come up with a working solo part. That's good. But I find in playing games that were not intended to solo, the reason why I do so is I love the IP. You know, certainly Conan and Xia, I play with the gaming group. I bring it out. They're frequently hitting the table, but there are times where I'm just feeling the narrative. You know, I'm feeling that vibe, and I'm like, I just feel like playing some Conan and just relaxing and rolling some dice. So what I find, or how I approach it in that, is ahead of time. It's almost like resolving a scenario. It's almost like resolving it, the AI ahead of time. I make a decision of how I'm going to play. So in the case of Conan, I'm going to play Conan and Friends. And the Overlord mechanic, I'm going to make a decision to say, play the lower powerful units first and spend other power gems getting rerolls. And push it out that way. Or I'm going to activate the most powerful monsters that I can all the time, and then I'll roll a d6 and randomly see where they go to attack which character. Resolving the AI mechanic ahead of time and then throwing it into the mix. Now, there is some predictability in there. Certainly I can meta game it out. There's no hidden information, but in resolving it that way, it's more like just seeing how the story is going to play out. Playing with the narrative, trying to create some cool moves and some interesting moments. In something like Xia, where it's a race game, you have these little spaceships and you fly around and you get victory points for doing different things. Exploring certain parts of the game board, maybe trading, dropping off, picking up, maybe resolving personal quests back and forth. So what I'll do is say, I'll pick 3 ships and say, okay, this ship is just going to trade. I'm going to make the best, Xia's open sandbox. I'm just going to make the best trading decisions that I can with this ship. This ship here is just going to make the best decisions to ferry passengers back and forth across the star map. And, you know, this one is just going to explore. So I set kind of a narrative. What am I going to do ahead of time? And then I stick to that and just kind of see, playing the game, seeing how it plays out. And at the end, based on those decisions for each ship, who pulled ahead? Who scored the most victory points? So in pushing out those two ideas, I find by resolving how I'm going to play as the player that goes against the other players, so the player against myself, I've come up ahead of time with how to play, the decisions I'm going to make, what I'm going to do. And then from there, it's kind of just watching the narrative evolve. Certainly not as elegant as having a well-defined solo system or playing a game, say like Dark Souls, where the AI fights you. So you could play one character, you could play 4 characters, you could play with 4 people, and they each control a character. From that perspective, yes, absolutely. But there are games that are not intended to solo, but you could still get that experience and push it out there and enjoy the narrative. and see where things evolve to.